I mean, it wasn't perfect, but they said, the mistake was, the way it read in their mistake, it said, except ye be converted, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. And that's for sure true. That is for sure true. So this is in the book of Matthew, but did Matthew actually say these words? Sounds like somebody else said these words. Who do you think said these words? Except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Who has the right to tell people who can go into the kingdom of heaven? Who? That's right. So Jesus said these words. Jesus said verily, which for you older ones, that also means like truly, for sure. For true, I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. So in order to get into the kingdom of heaven, you have to be converted. And that's what we're going to talk about. What does converted mean? Maybe one of these weeks we can convert something. I think we'll just see. But in order to be converted, he said you had to become as a little child. Become as little children. So can little children act like adults? Can they have pride and depend on themselves like adults do? Yes, they can. But can adults become like little children and be trusting and trusting in somebody else, not full of pride? Yes, they can. So even if you're a child, you still have to become like a child. You have to make sure you're believing God like a child. You're not trying to do your own thing. So that's enough about our verse. Today, I'm going to tell you about, I'm going to tell you about a young man, and his name was Saul. Now Saul, he grew up, this map is confusing for the adults in the room. Can you tell why this map is confusing?
It's opposite.
It's opposite. That's right. The land is blue, and the sea is gray. I don't know how whoever put this together didn't notice that I mean, any other color, it would have worked out. But anyway, so Saul lived up here, and almost none of our story is over here either. But anyway, Saul lived up here. Whoops, where's my land? There we go. Saul lived up here. He grew up in a Greek city. He didn't grow up in Jerusalem or in the land of Israel, but his parents were Jews. His parents were Hebrews. They were particular Hebrews, and they made sure that Saul had a very special education. They made sure that Saul knew what the Bible said. They wanted to be very careful with their son that he would obey the laws and the rules of the Bible. But Saul grew up, he didn't grow up in Jerusalem or in Israel. He grew up living around other Greeks and pagans, people that did not believe the Bible. Saul and his family would go to the synagogue up there in his hometown, and they would learn things. They would study the Bible together. But after Saul got to be a little bit older, his parents thought, we're concerned that he has a super good education. He's doing okay right now, but we're going to send him down to Jerusalem. They're going to send this young man off to school in Jerusalem where he could sit and learn from Gamaliel. Gamaliel was known, all the Jewish people knew about how smart Gamaliel was, how wise he was, how he understood all the different things in the laws and the rules and all of the different stuff in there about. And so they sent Saul off to school under the teaching of Gamaliel. And Gamaliel, and so Saul, as he got older and older, and he listened to Gamaliel, he was a very good learner. He'd hear it, and he'd remember it. And he'd hear another thing, and he'd remember it. And he'd hear another thing, and he would say, oh, that's connected to that, isn't it? And he would learn from his teacher. He was just super smart. And he understood all the different laws of the Bible, and he but he didn't just know it up here. He tried to do everything that those laws said. And there was a group of people who were very careful about obeying all the rules in the Bible. They had counted up all the different rules. They put them in categories, and they made sure that they kept all those rules. And in fact, they made some rules just to keep themselves from breaking God's rules. So they had rules on top of rules, and this group of people, very holy people, very interested in doing what the Bible says, was called Pharisees. Gamaliel was a Pharisee, and Saul grew up to be a Pharisee, and he studied and knew all the laws, and he obeyed all those. He knew, he was for sure, that if he would keep all those rules, then when he died, he would go to heaven. And that's an important thing, because the other choice is not a place we want to go. So Saul would work really hard. He would read and study. Then he would think about what he did, and what he did when he went into town, and what he did when he went to the marketplace, and what he did when he went to the synagogue. All of them he would study and learn, and he made sure that he never broke any rules. He was a good young man, and he wanted all the other people to keep those good rules because he wanted them to have a good life and a good life after this life. Well, when he was in Jerusalem, he would go to different synagogues, and some of the synagogues he liked to go to were the ones where they spoke the language that he grew up learning when he was a boy. So in Jerusalem, there were synagogues that spoke Hebrew. That's the language of those people in Israel. And there were synagogues that spoke Greek. And that's the language of the town where Saul grew up. Saul grew up speaking Greek and going to the synagogue where they spoke Greek. So he would go to that synagogue. And one day he was at the synagogue and he heard a guy there talking about a different way to get to heaven. This guy said, this way is the way. It was a new way, and it was the way. There was no other way but this way. And Saul thought, that's not true. I've been studying the Bible forever. All my life I've been studying the Bible, and this new way can't be the way. The Bible says what is the way. I've studied all the different rules, all the books of Moses, and you have to keep every single one of these things in order to get to heaven. And I'm doing that. But this guy, he's getting people away from the truth. He's telling, you know who that guy was? That guy was Stephen. We heard about Stephen 2 weeks ago. But Stephen was there and other people with him. They said there's a new way. The way. This way. But they said the way wasn't a bunch of rules. The way was a person. And that made it even worse. How could any person, who every person sins, be the way to get to heaven? And so Saul was like, this is not true. These people are crazy. And then they said who the person was. Who do you think Stephen, telling all the people in the synagogue, was telling the people who the way was, the new way to get to heaven? Who was Stephen saying was the new way to get to heaven? Allie, what do you think? God? Well, God never lived in a man's body on the earth. Jesus, that's right. So Stephen was telling the people in this synagogue that Jesus is the way, the new way to get to heaven. And Saul was like, no way that guy is the way. I've heard about him. They crucified him. He's a criminal. There's no way a criminal who's dead can be the way to get to heaven. The way to heaven is to obey all the rules and laws of Moses and all the rules that we learned on top of the laws of Moses. And so he got angry. He got very angry at Stephen, and a bunch of his friends got angry at Stephen, and they decided, we learned 2 weeks ago, they decided that they were going to catch Stephen, and they were going to even lie about Stephen so that Stephen could be stoned. And that's what they did. Saul was there when it happened. The Bible tells us that Saul held the coats of all the people who were throwing the rocks on top of Stephen. And he was glad to hear that. And he's like, okay, that's done. Now we got to get rid of all the other people that believe in this way. This new way to heaven. This Jesus who's dead. And so he would go from house to house listening to people in this house talk about Jesus good. Oh, they do. I'm gonna catch them. I'm gonna beat them. I'm gonna tie them up. I'm gonna take them off to jail. And he did. He persecuted anybody who believed this new way. And he sent them to jail. He beat them. And pretty soon people were like, this guy's all over town. You can't go down one street or up the other without him finding out about us. We better get out of here. And they didn't mind suffering for Jesus. But they wanted to live their life, and so they would go to the next town over. And you know what they did in the next town over? What did Christians do in the next town over? They told the people there about the way, Jesus Christ. Right? Pretty soon there wasn't very many Christians left in Jerusalem because Paul and his friends were persecuting anybody they could find. Saul and his friends were persecuting anybody they could find. And so then Saul said, he went to the chief priest. He says, okay, I've got most everybody gone from Jerusalem, but I hear there's a bunch of these people that believe in this way up in Damascus. You know how far away Damascus was? 150 miles away. 150 miles away. That's like all the way to Indianapolis. That's a long way away. And so, but Saul said, if you will give me permission, write a letter saying I can do it, and you give me some men, so that when I catch these people, we can tie them up. We'll get a bunch of Christians, maybe all of these people that believe in this Jesus way to heaven, and we'll bring them back to Jerusalem. So the chief priests, they said, sure thing. We'll write that letter for you. We'll give you some men. And off Saul went. He was so zealous for his way. He didn't want anybody to believe another way, especially this way, this dead man, Jesus, that people were saying was God. That's blasphemy to Saul. So he got his men. He was on his donkey, riding 150 miles off to Damascus. And the Bible says that as they got close to Damascus, all of a sudden, out of the sky came a bright, bright light, way brighter than the sun. It was so bright, everybody walking along fell down on the ground. Saul fell off of his donkey down on the ground, and they were there, like, whoa, what happened? And then they heard a noise. Everybody there heard a noise. I think probably some thought it thundered. Others were like, what is that? But Saul could tell what the noise was. It was a voice. And Saul heard a voice, and because the voice said his name, the voice said, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Saul thought, what is that? And he looked up at that bright light, and he saw Jesus. He didn't know who Jesus was. He said, who are you? And the voice, the man that he saw up in heaven, said, I am Jesus, who you are persecuting. Now, I don't know how long this conversation took place, but who did Saul think he was persecuting? Who did Saul think he was persecuting? He thought he was persecuting Christians. There's no way he was persecuting Jesus because Jesus was dead. How could he persecute a dead person, right? But Saul's looking up into heaven, and there's somebody that's really, really very much alive, and he's saying, you're persecuting me. I'm Jesus, whom you're persecuting. And right then, Saul was changed. He knew Jesus wasn't dead. He knew he should be obeyed. Jesus was God. Jesus was talking to him from heaven, so he knew he was God. And so you know what Saul said next? He said, Lord, what do you want me to do? I don't know what tone of voice he had. We could put that in a lot of tones of voice, but Now he's not saying, I'm going to get rid of these people that believe in this new way. He's saying, what do you want me to do? That's been changed, isn't it? Forever before that, he's like, I'm getting rid of anybody that believes in Jesus. And now he's saying, what do you want me to do? And Jesus said, get up, go into Damascus, go to the house of Judas, and wait there, and it will be told you what you should do. So, Saul got up. He looked around. The bright light was gone. Everybody could see that. But Saul couldn't see anything. As he was looking up at Jesus and the bright light from heaven, his eyes were blinded. And he couldn't see. And he groped around. And so the men that were with him had to take him by the hand and lead him the rest of the way into Damascus. So what do you think Saul did? Jesus said what? Go to the house of Judah on Straight Street and wait. You think that's what Saul did? Yeah. Because he said, Lord, what do you want me to do? And he was different. He wasn't fighting against this Jesus way, Jesus person anymore. He was going to do what he said. He was going to obey. So he went there, and he went to the house of Judah, on Straight Street, and he waited. 1 day, 2 days. He didn't eat. He prayed. He thought about what had happened to him, what he saw, what he heard on the road coming into Damascus. 3 days, and he was waiting. Now, during that time, about the 3rd day, there was another man. His name was Ananias. Now, this is a good Ananias. We heard about an Ananias earlier where he's dead. He's not alive, right? Because he lied to the Holy Ghost. But this Ananias, he lived in Damascus, and he was a good man, and he believed in Jesus. Well, one day he was sleeping, and in his sleep, or maybe not in his sleep, but I think it was in his sleep, he had a vision of the Lord. And for Ananias, it wasn't scary, and it wasn't a bright light. The Lord came to him in a vision and said, Ananias, there's a man by the name of Saul. He is praying. He is on Straight Street in the house of Judas, and I want you to go to him. And Ananias said, I've heard about Saul. Saul is, he's the guy that's killing, persecuting believers. And I even heard that he had permission from the chief priest to come up here and do the same thing up here. And Jesus said to Ananias in his vision, go see Saul, because he is going to be a special servant for me. And you need to tell him how he's going to speak before the Gentiles. He's going to tell the gospel to the Gentiles and before kings and others. And he's going to have to suffer for my sake. So Ananias, what do you think Ananias did? Did he say, I'm too scared? No. Ananias went. He went to Straight Street, and he went to found the house of Judas, and there was Saul inside there, probably laying there because he couldn't see anything. And Ananias came to Saul, and he said, Brother Saul, the Lord, who you saw on the way to Damascus, came to me and told me some things. They talked for a little bit, and Ananias put his hands on Saul, and all of a sudden, like scales, just little film came off of his eyes, and now Saul could see again. And Saul was saved. He was changed. And when somebody's changed or saved in the Bible, you know what they do? One of the first things they do? They get baptized. We've talked about baptism before, and that's what Saul did. He got baptized. By being baptized, he was telling other people that witnessed his baptism that he was now a follower of Jesus. He was not an enemy of Jesus. He wasn't going to go persecute Christians. He was a believer in Jesus. And so Saul was baptized, and then he went to the synagogue. Now, when he went to the synagogues, what was he going to do in the synagogue on his way there? He was going to go there, and he was going to listen for anybody that was talking about this new way, Jesus. And he was going to catch them and tie them up and drag them back to Jerusalem. But now when he goes in the synagogue, what is he doing? He's getting up and he's telling everybody what Jesus did for him. he's telling all those people there that haven't yet believed in Jesus that they better believe in Jesus because Jesus is the way to get to heaven, right? He is telling them that all those rules that they use, those are good. It's the Bible, but Jesus is the way to heaven. Has Saul been changed? Oh yeah, he was changed once. When he was young, he hated Jesus. Well, he didn't even think he hated Jesus because he thought Jesus was dead. But he hated anybody that said that Jesus was alive and that was the way to get to heaven. But now, he's seen Jesus. He knows Jesus is alive. Jesus is in heaven. Jesus is God. And he's got to go tell as many people as he can about Jesus. The way. The true way to get to heaven. He is changed. All the people that heard him said, is this Saul? We've heard about Saul. This guy doesn't act like the Saul that we heard about. Right? Why doesn't he act like the Saul that they heard about? Because he's been changed. He was converted. He was saved. He turned from going this way and not believing in Jesus, and now he's going this way, and he does believe in Jesus. Saul was changed. Saul was a Jew. He was somebody, he grew up learning all the laws of the Bible, all the rules of the Bible, knowing all the stories of how God worked in the land of Israel. But he needed to be saved. He needed to be changed. So it doesn't matter whether all that stuff he knew, he still had to turn from his own thinking, his own way, and believe on Jesus and be changed. And he is just like everybody in the whole world. Everybody, if they're going to go to heaven, has to be converted. Everybody does. Everybody. Jesus said, I say unto you, except ye be converted, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. No one goes to heaven unless they're converted. And be converted, Jesus said you have to become as little children. You have to be like children who will believe on Jesus. Say, well, if that's what's true, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what has to happen in order to believe on Jesus to get to heaven. All right, so we have learned this week about Saul, a Jew, who was converted. Next week we're going to learn about a different kind of person, a different nationality. And you know what? He needed to be converted too. So we're going to learn about him next week.